Guest is a good friend of mine named David Steelman. I'll tell you a little bit about him before we have him on. David Steelman earned a BA in economics from the University of Missouri and graduated first in his class from the University of Missouri Law School in '78. He is the son of the late Dorman L. Steelman, who served in the Missouri House of Representatives as a circuit judge and as chairman of the Missouri Republican Party. Steelman was elected to his first term in the Missouri House of Representatives in 1978 at the tender age of 25. And he was reelected in 1980 and 1982 and was chosen by his colleagues to serve as minority floor leader. In 1992, Steelman lost the attorney general election to Jay Nixon, 51 to 45, barely. David Steelman, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Now, I don't know, Chris, do I have to call you Mr. Arp since you're hosting a radio show?
Yes. No, I'm just kidding. You know, I'm learning something about you. I didn't know you were first in your law school class.
People who know me for some reason find that unbelievable. I don't know what that says about me.
Well, not to me and Becky. Me and Becky adore you, and we're glad that we're friends of yours, and we're glad to be in your presence. Hey, two things I want to talk to you about. One of them, I want to talk about the Eric Greitens transition and the governorship and what we can expect. And also this article that came out this morning in the Post-Dispatch about the title is Missouri Panel Calls for Big Changes on Campus with Regards to Tuition. And that's relevant to you because you are a University of Missouri curator. And
that is correct.
So I wanted to get your thoughts on it, first of all, overall.
Well, first of all, the commission was controversial when then State Senator Kurt Schaefer passed it, but I never knew why. It had some outstanding people on it. Jeannie Sinkfield, who is a very accomplished academician in her own right at University of Chicago. Gary Forsey, former CEO of Sprint, and former president of the University of Missouri. Dave Spence, the Republican candidate for governor, very successful businessman, and a whole host of others. So I'm not surprised that they did the work. They looked into things, and they've come up with some really great recommendations, which I will tell you, I've talked to members of the board. We take it seriously. We're going to try to implement it, and I'm grateful for their work.
I'll tell you, one of the recommendations that really stood out to me, which I think is something that all schools should have implemented years ago and should be in place, is the cost of your degree depends on the field of study that you're undertaking. That if you are studying engineering, that degree is going to be a little more expensive than an education degree per se. What do you think is the likelihood of that passing?
Well, we require a little legislative help. In 2007, the legislature, in response to what were increasing tuition costs, which we can sure talk about, I think during that period of time, somewhere in there, you had a daughter at University of Missouri.
Yeah, she graduated this year from the
so
journalism
school.
You know all
about that. But at some point in time, and they meant well, they put a cap on tuition to the cost of living. Now, what happens when you do that? It prevents the flexibility of raising certain programs more than other programs and making up for that revenue. And some programs, frankly, the expense of has increased far more than the cost of living. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Engineering right now, you pay the faculty. Some of our engineering faculty get paid a couple $100,000 a year and more. And that sounds like a lot of money, but they could make more than that in the private sector. The labs are tremendously expensive. One mass spectrometer costs $500,000 or more. And you compare that to English, where the professors are making $60,000, $70,000, maybe $80,000 a year, no lab space. And so clearly the cost of educating the child or a young person with that English degree is far less than the engineering degree. And all we're saying is let us charge what that engineering degree costs. Plus those students have tremendous job opportunities and are going to be making very significant salaries when they get out.
You know, the one thing that I've never really understood about the cost of tuition and all of that, if you look overall, in some cases, tuition is rising 2 and 3 times, the pace of inflation. But you never hear, it seems like, parents and academicians and these people really complain about that. They'll complain about the cost of living going up for other things, but when it comes to tuition, you just don't see that same groundswell.
Well, I will tell you, I have had a lot of complaints, though, as a curator about the cost of tuition. And the cost of tuition is extremely important to me because as a public land-grant institution, the University of Missouri simply must keep college affordable. And in particular, you look at UMSL, University of Missouri St. Louis, which I think is an anchor to that northern part of the county and the city. It's critical to keep it affordable. And I think there are things we have to do in education and higher education to make it more affordable. I think we've had some administrative creep of too many administrators. I think we've had some bloated salaries. However, having said that, the model for public education is changing with budget cuts and what's happened. The growth of Medicaid has really dominated the Missouri budget, plus some tax cuts. There's simply not the money that there used to be to go to public education, and that has to be made up somewhere, and tuition is where to make it. Now, if I can say one other thing, I'm not trying to filibuster you, Chris. It has to be done right. Now, at Arizona State, what they did when they increased tuition, they have a vast underserved Hispanic population who had significant affordability issues, and they had to raise their tuition significantly. But what they did with a lot of that tuition was plow that back into financial aid. So when you're talking about a tuition increase, there will also be a significant part of that, I'm hoping at least 30%, that is put back into financial aid for deserving students, both underserved populations and, frankly, for high-achieving students, too, to keep them in Missouri.
Tell me, you're a curator for the University of Missouri. Have you seen, has black or minority enrollment, has it gone up this semester after all of the brouhaha that went on in the campus last year?
No, the brouhaha, and I haven't seen this semester's, but I believe the brouhaha, as you put it, which I don't minimize, by the way, but I think that has cost us significant African-American enrollment, and I'm hoping that we move past that, and because I try to make this very clear, is that I am not going to say what the perspective of an African-American is, because I'm not. But I believe and have talked to a lot of those students and faculty who really consider the University of Missouri a very welcoming and open place. Now, having said that, I think your daughter had an ugly incident. So I understand that we have some work to do.
Now, I know one thing, part of these recommendations that a lot of conservatives especially were probably happy about. Is it going to be a little easier now to get rid of professors like Melissa Click? And she was the one that was involved with the brouhaha, don't ask me to spell that, last year when she was saying that we need some muscle to clear out some of these reporters. Do these rules changes make it easier to fire teachers or professors like her?
Well, they haven't made the rule changes. They recommend changes.
That's right.
Now, what we'll do there is, and let me say this, our faculty discipline procedure at Missouri was antiquated and in fact required a complaint be made, then that person who complains has to act as a prosecutor. There's a lot of pressure on professors not to do that, and that's why the board had to step in and fire Melissa Click, which cost us what's called an AAUP censure. It's one I'd gladly accept again for that. But it clearly has to be changed. But at universities, you have to change that with the faculty. But there's a new dean of engineering, a year old now, Dean LeBoa, just outstanding. And she's been talking about the need for solid post-tenure review because, again, to keep our costs down, to keep affordability, we cannot carry professors who are no longer productive.
Right.
If you're paying, particularly in engineering, as I said, a high salary, they have to be productive. The current tenure system, in my opinion, locks in unproductive faculty, and the changes that we'll be pushing for that will take a while will allow the dean and other faculty even to remove or put pressure on unproductive salary to either step down or get productive.
David, I hate to cut you off, but thank you for your time. We're coming up against a hard break, but it's always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. And please give your wife my regards and Happy New Year.
I sure will. And Becky, we didn't even get a talk. I'm sorry.
She's sitting there. She's laughing. Thank you, David.
All right.
Have a good weekend.
You, Chris.
Okay, we'll wrap it up. We'll be back after the next hour.